Hello, everybody. I'm Alan Zadko, and welcome to Workshop 3 in the audio show division. Tonight's workshop is going to feature a discussion about exercises 2 and 3, and that's going to get us started on the creative side um, of our program. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen and get my presentation up here. And as usual, we'll hold questions until I'm done with all of the slides. And if anything occurs to you later or tomorrow, you can always DM me on Quip, and that goes for the people who are watching this workshop who are not here tonight. Okay, so audio show, audio show, workshop 3. Easy for me to say. Picking your topic and making a segment by segment outline. So, about this workshop, as I mentioned, this workshop covers exercises 2 and 3, which are both found in your exercises and worksheets folder. The worksheets are comprehensive and full of information. For the most part, they are explanatory. So this workshop's not really about doing those exercises. It's about giving you some extra information to help motivate you to do these exercises. If you have any trouble with the exercises, consult your producer or me for help. We're always here for you. So let's start with picking your topic for the pilot. So let's discuss how to do that and pick the right one for your pilot episode. There are two primary reasons why picking the correct topic for your first episode, professionally called a pilot episode, are so critical for your success. Reason one, selling the show to advertisers. So the first people outside of the New Degree staff who are likely to see your pilot episode are third-party advertisers that want to see proof of content. While you have lots of evidence in your arsenal that you have a great show idea, the best way to prove your show is viable is by allowing your sales targets to actually hear the pilot. Now, this will not be possible during phase 1 of our program as you're raising money to build the pilot. So this is not a catch 22. Don't worry about that. Initially, we're just going to need the first 4K to be raised without a pilot, and that can be done with 1 to 2 sales, right? In phase 2, though, you're going to need to fill out 7 to 9 future episodes with ads. So that's like 2 to 3 ads per, depending on what your strategy is. That's another 14 to 27 advertisements, and that's how we're going to get to $45,000, $60,000 so that you guys can make a lot of money for yourselves. Having a great pilot completed is going to aid you immensely. It may become your main tool for selling the show to sponsors. The reason, number two, for building your pilot, or I should say, picking the right topic for your pilot, is to build your audience correctly. Your show is going to be fully released all at once. That means you're going to distribute episodes 1 through 8 or 1 through 10, depending on your format, all on the same day through your distribution platforms. This works like a Netflix show where they release entire seasons of a TV show once the entire season is fully built and ready. This capitalizes on how many people like to power their way through an entire season rather than waiting for the next episode to air a week later, like network television shows or like podcasts. A great pilot will get listeners interested. So, most audience members will give a show a single chance to prove to them that they should be full time listeners. Let's face it, there are a lot of ways for people to spend their time. Having a powerful, insightful, incredible pilot is absolutely necessary to convince your audience to stay tuned for the entire season. While I always say the weakest episode in your show can bring the entire season down, which is true, If you have a weak episode late in the season, listeners will forgive if they really like the first batch. So we want to put our best subjects up front and make it as top heavy as a strategy. Don't save your best for last. You hear that expression all the time, especially in show business. And big, save your best for last. While there is some truth to that, as you want people to be excited enough to anticipate the next season. But if they don't get to your last episode because your first few weren't compelling, then what does ending big matter? Don't save your best for last. Do the opposite. Sell your show properly by picking the most exciting topic as your first episode. Only tell your personal story first if it is the best story of the season. So some of you do have amazing stories to tell, or you might want to set the table for your season with a discussion about your overall topic as a whole. And this can work, it can be effective. But is it your most exciting, most dynamic opening episode? Remember that you can save your personal story and the reason for doing the season show for episode 2 and instead open the show with your most exciting idea for the entire season. I would do exactly precisely that if I were considering the correct ordering structure for the show. Don't do the typical pilot. A lot of creators make the poor mistake of thinking that the first episode needs to be an explanation of the rest of the series. You see this in both fiction and nonfiction shows. It's usually slow and boring stuff. Creators think that they are setting the table properly, but in truth, they aren't. When you explode out of the gates with your hottest material, you're proving your concept to both advertisers and listeners. Now they are sucked in and you are ready and they are ready to buy in. That's when you can afford to slow the pace slightly and explain things. How to determine your best stuff. So, to get more insight on what excites your listeners, you might want to craft a list of subjects based on material both in your book and in your head that, first of all, truly stimulates you. Then send that list out to friends, family, colleagues, people you know bought and read the book and are interested in the subject, or anyone else you think of that might want to eventually listen to your show. We will call these people beta listeners for research purposes. Slide lower graded items to the middle. Let them number the subjects or grade them. When you see A plus next to certain items constantly from different beta uh, listeners, those are your hot ticket items. Conversely, if you see a C or a D next to a subject regularly, you might dump it and not use it at all unless it's central to your core idea and you need it. But basically, when someone gives something a C grade, what are they saying? They're saying, meh. Now, you might know that you have exciting ideas for that particular episode that you're like, that's one of my best ones. But you need to be able to convince people to listen to your show. So you want to listen to them. And if they're going, I'm not that interested in that, don't make it your pilot episode. You can still have it as part of the season. And if it's a great episode, you'll prove them wrong, right? But you don't want them to prove you wrong. Okay? That's where it gets critical. So if you absolutely need a subject matter to be included in your season, but you get data that it is lower graded or listed down on the list than others from your beta listeners, don't use that as your pilot at all. It is the wrong subject. Do exercises 2 and 3 right away. So I should mention here that even though we might use beta listeners to get good data, all of you should not wait to choose a subject and fill out exercises 2 and 3. Your worst case scenario in doing so is that you'll be working on an episode that won't end up being your pilot, but you'll be creating the materials on time for an episode later in your season. So it's definitely time to get the knowledge that working on these exercises will give you and not push them back while you wait on data. I want to stress that phase 1 is about education in this program as much as it is about building a great pilot. So I want you to do these exercises so that you start learning all of the core elements within them. It's going to help you really build a great show for your entire season. You can change subjects right up until submission. Okay. So once you begin recording material, you'll probably want that to be your pilot episode, but it doesn't have to be. If you're set on a subject, do the exercises, write the scripts, and record material. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. That is all useful, even if you decide to switch the topic. So I don't want you to really record any material until you've worked with your producer on vetting those scripts and taking deep dives and all of that. So I'm really talking about as we get further into the process. But what might happen is you might get information back from beta listeners that makes you think, you know what? I've been doing all this stuff for this episode, but the feedback I'm getting is letting me know that this isn't the right episode to start my show with. Actually, this episode that I was going to have is episode 4 or episode 6. Everybody's really excited about that. Let me put this aside. Let me switch gears and let me work on that episode and make that my pilot now and reframe everything. And that's okay. As long as you haven't submitted everything to post-production already and they've made it, right? You can work let me just remind you, you can work on as many episodes with your producer and post-production as you have financed. So if you go ahead and you just make a $6,000 sale right away, you can work on 2 episodes with your producer and post-production. But let's say that you just make that 4,000 up front, okay? You can only really work on 1 until you bring in more money. That's how our program works. I remind you of that. The reason for that is because I promised my boss, Brian, that I would not suck all of the profits out of the book division like a Nosferatu and divert it into our creation process here. We've got to be self-sufficient. And that means I'm reliant on you guys to go get that advertising money. So that's what it is. We're going to do this back and forth. As I said, we'll be working on financial stuff and creative stuff simultaneously or back and forth as it makes sense to do. So your producer is allowed to check your exercises. Your producer can see that you did exercises 2 to 3 with a quick skim to make sure that you're on schedule. Having them review the work by going through it and providing actual editing analysis can't occur until you finance phase 1. So there's a difference between them skimming it and just saying, okay, I see what you're doing here. Here's a note or 2 on what I quickly see in the 3 minutes I took to look at this. And for them to do what we eventually want them to do, which is a 20-minute deep dive. Like, I'm going to go and look at every word here and see what we're doing. Okay, so those are 2 different things. So once you finance, there's going to be a greater level of analysis from your producer, and your producers are all qualified to do this. So I'm excited about it when we get to that point. But what you're going to do right now, you're going to do these exercises, tagging your producer so they can skim the exercises and see if you did them correctly and completely. And then you can go back to working on your financial plan. Once exercise 3 is done, you can and should move on to exercise 4, which is going to be covered in our next workshop. But do not submit it, okay? So, however, remember that your producer can only review the materials for 1 episode if you've only raised enough for 1. And once an episode goes to post-production and they edit it, same thing. So you can work on your materials in full, but simply not have your producer and post-production staff review it until such time as you're 100% certain it will be your pilot. Okay, so what this means is you can do the preliminary work for all of your episodes. So this system can work just fine without involving your producer for now, right? So you can go ahead and make the creative materials for what you think is going to be your pilot all the way up to writing the scripts. But don't record things and don't submit them to post-production because we want your producer to be heavily involved in that process. So there's a back and forth going on here. So now I'm going to switch gears from the pilot, and I'm going to talk about the segment by segment outline. Okay. I've gotten mixed responses on my segment by segment outline for people that haven't done a lot of making these kinds of shows before. A lot of creators get bored or frustrated by the idea of needing an outline for each piece of their show. Some creators want to wing it and create in the moment. That's fun. This, for people who don't have at least 10 years of experience working on shows regularly, usually results in a horrific disaster. I'm not going to allow it in the program. In this program, we're going to strive to teach all of our creators good show making habits. And so you'll be required to do all of these exercises and build the right tools for success. This is mandatory. Please don't make a fuss, just do it. Okay. What is a segment? I said, make a segment by segment outline. Eh? What does that mean? So you're going to break your show into small digestible chunks. You're not going to do a 10, 20, or 30-minute show that's just you talking without any breaks, interruptions, or other pieces, because the show would not be dynamic. We call each of these individual pieces segments. A segment can be 15 minutes long or 1 second long. The length does not differentiate it. We need an outline of what these segments will be for plenty of reasons. These are listed right at the start of workshop 3, worksheet 3. No, this is workshop 3, worksheet 3, exercise 3. That should say exercise. That's why I'm going to erase that and change it, because I made a mistake. You will see that the reasons are sound, and it's not just a random exercise. It really is quite important. Creating a format for your show. If you watch TV shows a lot or listen to radio dramas and podcasts, you'll see that many of them have a standardized format. That is to say that what occurs in segment 1 is identical in nearly all of the episodes. The same with segment 2, 3, and onwards. This is called a format. This is not necessary, but many creators, especially those new to show creation, find this extremely helpful for building a dynamic show with a format that is easy to replicate. Formats can be fun. If you know you're going to have specific features in every episode, why not format the show so that your listeners get the rhythm of the show by putting those features in exactly the same place every time? If you have one guest every show, or you have a segment that defines something you want to discuss every episode, then you can build your show around those kinds of segments. It will then make it easier to figure out where to put in a sound effect, piece of music, or where to slot your third-party advertisements. Scripting becomes easier with a format. If you know you're going to have particular segments that are the same length and positioned in the same place every episode, it makes writing scripts for each episode easier to do. Let's say your first segment after the opening credits will be a 30-second brief discussion on the main topic or topics that will be covered in the episode. You then want a brief 3-second piece of music as a segment breakup, and then you will speak on the first subject for 8 minutes. Now you can easily craft those first 2 scripts, the 30-second opening and the 8-minute discussion, for literally every episode in your season, right? You can get ahead in phase 1. Writing the scripts and setting yourself up for recording will be a lot of fun. I always encourage creators to get their hands dirty and book your schedule so fun stuff is happening constantly. You're going to see this when we get to exercise 4 and make a production schedule. You're going to want to mix the fun stuff in and the not so fun stuff together so it all gets done. As we are in phase 1, you want to focus on the creative materials just for the pilot. But once they are done, you can go ahead and work on other episodes as long as you're focusing on bringing in money, right? So we want to balance the financial side stuff and the creative stuff. Balance with a leaning towards financing. Just remember that your producer and post-production staff can't help you perfect the creative materials until you finance. So if you start leaning towards creative work because it's fun, you're going to lose sight of how to win in this particular program. What I don't want you to do is just go, all right, I'm going to build all the scripts for my shows, my season now, do that. And then you're not making contact with sponsors. You're not doing the work there because you might find that to be less fun. Most people who are show creators find the creative creation of the show materials to be a lot more fun than going and doing the business side things. So you can get lost in that, and we don't want that to happen to you. And but having said that, we don't want you to fall behind on the creative side either. We want to balance towards getting everything prepped creatively. So once you do finance, we can immediately start the process with your producer, vetting your creative materials so you are ready to record without a large gap in time. Don't have a big gap. So if all you do is focus on the financing side, then when you get the money for phase one, you will first have to do exercises 2 through 4, then write scripts, unless you're improvising, which some people are, and then record. Wouldn't it be better if you have exercises 2 through 4 completed, have the preliminary first draft of your script done and ready for review so that your producer can jump in the moment you finance? Multitasking to do both financial and creative side materials while also balancing everything else in your life is a tough ask. I know. But that's what we're doing in this program, learning how to make a real show around our real lives. We never said it's going to be easy, but by doing the exercises, we will make it as simple as we possibly can by breaking down each task in the proper order. You're never going to have to wonder what you should be doing next. It's all here in the program. So just meet us halfway. That's all we want you to do. Work out your schedule so you're getting all of your tasks for the show done in a timely fashion. We know you're busy people with careers. That's why you are the best people to make amazing shows, because you all have stories to tell. So don't drag your heels. Get on and complete exercises 2 and 3 and let your producer know as soon as you do so we can get those green check marks in and move on to the next steps creatively. Exercises 3 and 4 are linked, especially in phase 2, where they're really linked. But you're going to discover in exercise 3 that the segment by segment outline and the production schedule creation covered in exercise 4 are linked and can be done side by side through multiple rounds if you choose that method. While I'm not covering exercise 4 today, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. There are several methods for completing exercise 3. If you choose to link it, you can and should. This is more usually done in phase 2 when you have a full season to create. You don't have to worry about it too much now. For the most part, you probably will be able to figure out everything in your pilot episode with one run through, but you might not. And for me to touch on this a little bit more and give you a little bit more detail, what I mean is when you're filling out your segment by segment outline, when you do your first draft of it, you may not have everything in your head outlined. And you may have to figure things out. Am I going to have one guest or two? Am I going to speak for 5 minutes on this, or 8 minutes, or 10 minutes on this one subject? How many commercials am I going to have in there? How many sound effects or music interludes or things like that, special things to break things up do I want? So you're going to kind of make this big list for yourself, probably on a scrap piece of paper that no one's going to see but you. And what's going to happen is that as you're writing the segments down, you're actually making a task list for yourself. That's an action plan. If you decide you're going to have one interview guest, then you need to do all the outreach to get an interview guest and the preliminary stuff, like what questions am I going to ask this person, right? When you're making your production schedule, you're going to want to put all that into the production schedule. If you're going to have 2 guests, you need to do it for 2. For all of your script work, for those of you that are writing scripts for your segments, you're going to go through a 3-draft process. So you're going to want to get the first draft done so that when you finance and your producer is ready to jump in, they can jump right in and look at your script and read it and give you a lot of notes so that you can then do the second draft, which is the big rewrite, and the third draft, which is the polish. Now it's ready for recording. And of course, you've got to allocate the time to record, right? So this is all going to be tasks. And when you make your production schedule, what you want to do is anticipate every single task that you need to do on the financial side and the creative side, and look at your actual real life schedule with everything you've got going in your life, from the mundane chores that you have to do to the work schedule that you have to your social events. We want life balance. You want your hobbies in there. You want to have complete life balance. So that's what exercise 4 is going to be about. You can't make a production schedule unless you know what all of the tasks you have to do are going to be. And that's one of the primary reasons to make a segment by segment outline. If you can just look and see everything that's going to be in your show, now go, what do I have to do to make sure I have that? You might, if you want a particular piece of music, you might have to get the copyright rights to it, right? You're going to have to prove those copyrights. So now you have a letter to write. Again, it's that, kind of thing where if you don't figure these things out till later, it's going to make things a lot more stressful for you, where you go, okay, I've got to do all this outreach. I've got to do outreach to get the rights for these pieces of music that I want, or the soundbite that I want. I've got 2 interviews, so I've got to create all the materials for that and do the outreach for that. I want to do all that stuff early in the process so that I'm giving people the maximum amount of time to respond to me and set those things up so that we can, correspond and get our calendars synced up for an interview and such and such. So that's why exercises 3 and 4 are linked, because when you're making the segment by segment outline, it's okay to do like, okay, this is stuff I know is definitely going in, and position it, and then write down all the tasks, and then put all those tasks in your calendar, and then come back for a second run and start to fill in the blanks on exercise 3 and go, okay, I didn't know what was going to go in segment 2. Now I've done some real thinking on that. Now I've got it, and put it in, and then add those tasks to your production schedule. So that's why exercises 3 and 4 linked, and our next workshop is going to do a deep dive on making a production schedule. I didn't do a deep dive on exercise 2 and 3 because I feel that once you read the worksheets, you're going to be like, okay, I can do this. And if you have any questions, they'll be kind of individual to your show. You know what I mean? But with the production schedule, you've all made professional calendars before, but unless you've worked on a show before, you may not have incorporated a production schedule into your normal calendar. So that's something that I want to go over in depth, and that's going to be our next workshop. So, but having said that, don't wait for the workshop. Don't wait until our workshop on exercise 4 to take a full pass at exercise 3, even using the multiple round option that incorporates exercise 4. If you learn anything in our future workshop that provides you help with exercise 4, then you can go back and make edits to get it all done. But I don't want anyone using this sort of as an excuse not to make their segment by segment of, oh, I got to wait for this. I got to wait for data from my beta people. I need to know how to do the production schedule. No, we need to push forward through the early stages of the creative aspects of the pilot. So I really want you guys to push through and do exercise 2 and exercise 3 as soon as you can humanly get to it so that we start really pushing forward on the creative side of the ball. How many segments should I have? You know, making a segment by segment outline, um, that question is a natural one for most people. And the correct answer for this is as many segments as you need. Now, need is different than want. Okay, I want to stress that. So, what I'm talking about is, remember, you talking for long periods without a break of some kind will not make for a dynamic show. Break it up, even if it's just with a soundbite or a short 2-second music interlude to create variety. Incorporate all of your planned interviews, even though you have not signed speakers to waiver forms or have confirmations yet. Put all that on your schedule. The whole point is we're in the planning stages, and adding them will add the right task for your production schedule to lock in your interviews. You may not know who the guests are going to be yet. You may just know, I want a guest for this subject. That's enough information to put it in your segment by segment outline. We're on segments. Your commercial breaks are segments and should be incorporated into your segment by segment outline. You don't know who the sponsors will be yet. That doesn't matter. You can just list 20-second commercials and fill in the specifics once you sign the sponsors later. But plan it out. How many are you going to have in your pilot episode? 2, 3, 9? Don't have 9. Any insert that breaks up you talking in any way, shape, or form should be listed in your segment by segment outline. You can have too many segments. That being said, you don't want to overdo it. Only do what you need to make the show dynamic. If you break up the show too many times, it'll make it harder for the listeners to follow. They do want to settle in at times and listen to your excellent information. So there is a balance. Over the course of the creative cycle, your producer will help you strike that balance. It is not necessary for you to get it right in your initial drafts before your producer is directly involved. But I do want you to consider this so you try not to go overboard. Insert. So I used the term insert in the previous slide. I have an entire worksheet dedicated to defining this term. It is in your overview folder. It is literally called What Are Inserts? Please review this before you do exercise 3. It will help you understand how to put your show together. We'll be using terms like segments and inserts a lot, so you want to get familiar with this entertainment industry jargon and use it to your advantage. So most people find it comfortable to only work on one thing at a time. You all know that learning how to sell third-party advertisements is your main mission right now. Staying focused only on that singular goal would be far more relaxing for most creators. But at New Degree Studios, we position our creators for victory. So we can't be relaxed or comfortable because doing so would cause us to fall miserably behind schedule. So let's launch on the creative side. Do not let it concern you if your producer cannot help you with these materials except for a quick scan until you finance. Don't get it right, screw it up. This is our first draft of these creative materials. It's important that you learn how to choose a topic and make a segment by segment outline, then getting it all correct. When you inevitably finance, as I know you're going to, your producer will enter the fray and take a deep dive on all of your creative materials. You will then edit and recraft for excellence. We are not going to allow you to go through the process and make an episode of your show that isn't great. I promise. That's my personal promise to you. I'm going to be personally involved. Your producers are going to be heavily involved. They're highly skilled. They know what they're doing. They're going to help you. So don't lose sleep over whether it's done well or is 100% correct right now. Chances are your materials won't be, and that's okay. Phase 1 of this program is a class as much as anything else. We're in the learning stages. The only way to fail is if you don't do it at all. So if you do the worksheets You do the exercises, you can't fail. You have 100% chance of success rate. You just may need to do some recrafting, rethinking, editing. That's part of the creative process as we move forward. Workshop 4 is going to come up soon. Our next workshop is going to cover 2 subjects. Exercise 4, we're going to take a deep dive on the production schedule, and I want to touch on setting up interviews for your pilot and the entire season. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Just as I hoped, we have some time for Q&A. I don't know if you have any questions about picking the topic for your pilot or the segment by segment outline. If you do, now's the time.
Yeah, so I picked a topic, but I haven't involved anybody else. So I'm going to go back and get my author group together and say, hey, here's the radio series to go along with the book, and
right.
Which ones do you like?
And first of all, a couple of things are going to happen when you do that, because people who have read your book love that interaction with the authors. And they love to know that you haven't just faded into space, that you're working on the next thing. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're taking this to the next level. You can make a big announcement like, hey, I've been signed to a contract. We're making a show, that's based on my book. And I'm planning a full season of episodes. I'd like to throw some topics out to you guys and see which ones interest you. I'd love your feedback. You don't have to do much. Just look at these and either arrange them in the order that you like them, top to bottom, or grade them A+ to F, and let me know what interests you, or put something down like you don't want to put all this, you just want to give them one method, choose them, but you can be like, I love this topic, meh, this topic doesn't really interest me. There's lots of ways to do these polls. Essentially you're doing a poll. Your poll. So how you choose to frame that poll is up to you. You should use a method that you feel is going to give you the best information. And have fun. Make it fun for them. Make it fun for you. Make it a celebration. We always talk about that at New Degree. Everything needs to be a celebration, a party. It should be. When you're involving your readership, you want it to be a celebration. Like, this is the best thing that's happening on Earth today. You know what I mean? Like, and when you do that, when you frame it that way and you're having fun, people respond to that. Everybody, wants to be a part of something good. So if you have fun with it and you frame it that way, you make it a big positive, you're going to get responses. People will take 5 minutes of their time to put an A+ or a C next to things and send it back to you. If it's just a quick poll and they don't have a lot of work to do, then it's like, if it takes them 5 minutes to do, they'll do it and send it back to you. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
And then I found your segment by segment outline very helpful.
Okay.
So I did kind of follow that example and then stuck in scripts.
Okay.
In the middle. Right. I guess my question is, like, eventually we're going to have, for me, it's going to be 8. Other people have a different number. How do you really want us to outline it? Does it go on exercise for all of the episodes? Does it go on that one page for exercise?
So that's a great question. And the answer is that's a different exercise. Okay. So phase 1 is about learning sort of how to do it for one episode. So you get that framework. Okay. And I have a whole nother exercise for phase 2 on how to do 7 to 9 episodes of that. So great question. You don't have to, I try to kind of do building blocks when I'm teaching. And so I want you to learn how to do one, and now you've got that one. When you've got a full season to do, 7 more episodes, right? You say you have
It'll be 8 total.
yeah, 8 total. So you'll have done the first one. So you have 7 other episodes.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's a lot of ways to do it in which um you're going to do an individual area for each one. It doesn't go on. It's not continuous. Each episode is its own episode. It needs to be separated. Because you're going to put the materials for each episode in a different folder. You have your main folder
Mhm.
in your P Cloud, and you're going to make a folder for every episode.
I see.
And so you're going to have a segment by segment outline for each episode.
Mhm.
And then what's going to happen is that you're going to figure out as much of that as you can, because you're going to figure out you're going to want to set up, like, if you have a guest or two in every episode, you
Mhm.
don't want to wait until you've done 6 episodes to reach out to guests for
Yeah.
episode. You know what I mean? Like, so you're going to figure out, okay, I'm making my whole season here, 7 episodes.
Mhm.
When I'm doing my my schedule,
Mhm.
I've got to figure out what tests make sense for me to do first.
Okay.
So you want to do your outreach, and you're going to want to do tasks that keep your producer involved. So your producer's not necessarily waiting for the next piece from you also. It's going to be a learning curve. And that's why I've broken the program this way, because if we're doing it 1 through 8 right now, it would be overwhelming, the amount of information. So we do a pilot episode.
Mhm.
Building that pilot episode does a few things. We're going to get the artwork and the opening credits for your pilot done in this, but they'll be used on every episode. Your opening credits are going to be the same for episodes 2 through 8 also. So
Right.
it's done. The artwork's done in this phase 1. So we get a bunch of things done in phase 1, and we have a complete episode. So everybody can listen to this. You'll be free to use it to sell to third-party advertisers. You'll be free to, have friends and family listen to it and give you some feedback and things like that that'll help you with the rest of the season. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's really going to be great to do it this way. And your question was a relevant, important question, Natalie. But I want to frame this as building blocks. We're just
Mhm.
going to focus on doing 1 episode right now. And then now the one thing I'm going to talk about in workshop 4 is we do want to figure out, how many guests we want to have. If you can start doing things once you finish all the creative materials for the pilot episode,
Mhm.
you're going to go back and start doing exercises for the rest of the season, and starting to do outreach for all your guests and setting that up
Mhm.
is really very important. But we're gonna talk about that at length in our next workshop. So that's going to be coming up.
Well, and I'm feeling positive about that because I've already reached out to several people and they've agreed. There's just a couple episodes
Mhm.
where I have an idea of who I want to ask, but I haven't asked them yet. But the
Right.
rest
Okay.
are online.
It would, if you were that far ahead, I would be like, aces, great. I don't expect anybody to really be at that point yet where they've locked everything down,
Mhm.
and so that's okay. The fact that you've already got a couple of interviewers locked down is fantastic, and good job there.
Yeah.
Welby,
Yeah,
any questions from you? And
sure.
Natalie, if you have other questions, we'll get to them. But I
Yeah.
just want to
Okay.
throw it to Welby for a minute.
So I was reading on I think it's on one of the exercises was saying that like you got to read a book, feature one of your good chapters and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But it also said probably best to try to find somebody else to interview instead of the person you may have interviewed in your book. And so I was saying, so I'm gonna reach out to some certain people, pretty much talk about the same topic, but get a different perspective on the same topic. I guess that's that what you mean when you guys said that?
Yeah, because here's what it is. A lot of your listeners, not all of them, but a lot of your listeners will have read your book, right? And they read that interview. And so if you interview the same person on the same subject in your show,
Mm-hmm.
that's not very dynamic or exciting, is it? Right?
Right.
Okay. So we don't want to do, do-overs. Like we're not making an audiobook version of our, you know what I mean, of the interviews.
Mhm.
We,
I will say though, that,
Mhm.
in our book, I know in my book, I'm sure in yours will be, there's things that landed on the floor, that we're
Now
not used to.
that's different. If you want to talk to the same
Yeah.
people about different subjects
Or going deeper,
or
or
going
the
deeper,
background, like, hey, I said this in the book, but let's talk about what else was happening.
or let's talk about what's relevant now, like 2 or 3 years later,
Yeah.
or what.
Right.
All of that is fine. What I really, I just want to make sure that people aren't playing it so ultra safe that you're not making a show that, is going to excite, people. You've got to build an audience. And the
Right.
worst thing you can do in trying to build an audience is to make a show that I like that gives them deja vu. You know what I mean?
Right. I understand.
You know,
And to piggyback on that part, so
Mhm.
there's somebody I did interview for my book, and I recorded all my interviews on Otter,
Okay.
and I didn't really use her information, but I was wondering, is it possible I could turn that Otter interview into the audio show?
So here's what you have to do. Okay. So in your folders, or if it's not in your folders, your producers have access to it, is what we call a waiver release form.
Mhm.
Okay. You cannot use someone's materials in a way they weren't expecting or didn't give you permission
Okay,
for.
I got you.
But if you go back to them and you say, listen, I recorded these interviews, I'm doing an audio show now. Here's the specific stuff I want to use. Here's a transcript of everything I want to use. Here's a waiver form I'm required, basically by law and by my company, production company, for you to sign this. Can I use this material? If they sign and go, no problem,
Mhm.
then boom, it's done.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So that's okay.
and another thing about that I was kind of concerned about is that since it wasn't with the professional equipment, the microphone would, even though I recorded on Otter, the quality of the sound, I think, would that be
Well, that
affected?
the quality of the sound has to be good. During the pandemic, I want to make this point and hit this point home. During the height of the pandemic, everyone understood that no one had access to recording studios and the right equipment, and everyone was forgiving of lower quality sounding audio and all that.
Mhm.
We're out of that phase. Not that
Right.
COVID is cured or gone or anything like that, but um, now we're back to normal in the sense that everyone expects high level professionalism again.
Mhm.
And it's really bad for your sponsors. Your sponsors will feel like I always talk about don't set yourself up for a lawsuit, right?
Mhm.
So if
Right.
we promise your sponsors they're going to be part of a show that sounds great, that has high level, and then you have an interview where the sound quality isn't great, that's
Right.
not going to cut it.
Right.
It's much better to bring that person back in and go, okay, we really like this material. I want to use mostly this material, although if you have some updated thoughts, we can
Mhm.
use those updated thoughts. But the recording itself, we didn't use the right mics. Now we're going to use professional microphones and set it up and whatever, buy them a pizza or whatever,
Right.
and let them record it properly. One of the problems with interviews is that you can't always control their equipment, right? If
Mhm.
they're far away. But what you can do is use a program like Otter that helps mitigate some of that. And I talk
Mhm.
about that in my worksheet on interviews. You'll see in your folders, I have worksheets on how to do interviews properly, how to set
Mhm.
them up, how to set everybody up, and how to set the uh, basically use the recording programs that are out there to try and. But if you can really kind of tell people, hey, kind of need to use a professional mic on this,
Mhm.
you know, um, it is what it is, right?
Right.
So, um, all right. I don't want to go too in depth more on that. That's going to be our next workshop, but to answer questions about how to frame it, because it's going to be part of your workload in terms of the segment by segment outline and once you start doing your production schedule on worksheet 4.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to touch on all that stuff a lot more in depth, and you'll have read and really seen all of my information a lot more in depth. That's already in your folders. You can look at it now if you want to, but that's skipping ahead. Let's do exercises 2 and 3 first,
Okay.
get ourselves into that mode, and get our segment by segment outline really kind of fleshed out. Again, not perfect. I'm not looking for anyone to get it right now. I'm just looking for you to get that first draft in so that you feel like, okay, I'm starting to put this together now. And once we finance, then your producers are going to jump in, do a deep dive, and really talk about each and every segment with you
Okay.
and how to really make that work. All right.
All right.
Here.
Any other questions on exercise 2, exercise 3?
I don't have anything, but
I don't-
Okay. Then we are finished for tonight. Look at that, 6:58 p.m. I always try and
Oh,
make
that's
these
early.
things like an hour, and
there you go.
on point again. Okay, we did it.
You did it. You did it.
Yep. We did it.
Stephanie, thanks for joining us as one of our producers. It's it's great to have you here. I know you're going to be working hard with Welby once he gets
Yep.
all of this stuff put together, and of course Michelle's going to be watching this workshop tomorrow, and she'll be getting in deep as she always does with you, Natalie. So I will see you guys later.
All right.
Thanks very much for coming tonight, and we'll talk again very soon.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.
Good night.